Now we move on to our last session of the day. We've stopped with the panel discussions and we're going to go straight down to some updates from technical standards. So I'm delighted to introduce two of my colleagues. We've got Alexandre and we have Pierre. Alexandre is IAB Europe's technical director, and he will be giving an update on some of the new standards and how they're contributing to this trust and transparency debate. And then we will hear from Pierre, who will be giving information on the new shared campaign identifier project that IAB France have been working with BVDW, IAB Europe, and numerous stakeholders. And very interestingly, I think it was yesterday, we had a brilliant case study from Zander, who detailed exactly how SCID, the shared campaign identifier, was working for them. So I'm going to pass straight over to Alexandra, and then Pierre, you can take after from there.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. So I would like, yes, I can share my screen. Perfect. Okay, so now you can all see my screen, my presentation. Yeah, perfect. So hi everyone. So I'm yes, as Hélène said, I'm Alexandre Nderagakura, technical director, and then Pierre Gauthier will also make a quick update about SCID. So let's move on. So yes, the agenda of the day will be I will talk about Dchain chain object and Buyers.json. Second part will be about the IAB Tech Lab Transparency Center, and then last party it will be about SCID. So let's talk about Dchain chain object and Buyers.json. So let's first go back in time. Yes, over the last 2 years, Tech Lab has developed technology standards and best practices to provide, transparency and brand safety from sellers to buyers. So most only on supplies. So it was at stakes, at CERT, which is still in progress right now. A few years ago, supply chain object and seller.json, the new ones. End of 2019, we've presented SCID, formerly Trust ID, a common project with EdiPub, Smart Ad Server, Zander, IAB France, etc., to the Tech Lab. And this showed there is a need of more transparency, especially on buy side. And following that, we've created a task force named Buy Side Transparency in order to help the industry, to identify the buyers, the no advertiser, ensure brand safety, and ad quality. So the definition of Dchain chain object, who have been released during this summer, Dchain chain is to identify each entity that participates in the purchasing of an impression, Basically, it's a mirror of supply chain object. And the implementation is quite simple, is each entity, put a node in the bid response. For Buyers.json, it's a file, that enables an advertising system to publicly declare the buyers they are working with. So the mirror of a seller.json. So as you understand, this is what we've done on supply side. We want to apply this same thing on buy side. So let's see how it looks. Let's take an example. So we have an advertiser working with an agency, and the DSP and agencies are going to push their Buyer.json. Why? Because they work with a DSP work with entity, and agency work with also with an entity. The DSP, each agency, training desk, etc., has a SCID, which is an ID for each buyer. So in this case, for example, it will be 0 in the Buyers.json. And then you have the Dchain chain object. So this Dchain chain object, we're going to put all the node, all the entity who participating in purchasing this impression. First of all, you have the advertiser, because you want to display its creative. So it will be displayed in this Dchain chain object. Boom, we have this famous brand, we have a node. Second node, we have the agency working for the advertiser, but also we need to bring this transparency. So that's why there is a node for the agency. And then the last one is the DSP, because also DSP is a technology to purchase this impression. And at the end, this Dchain chain object is put in the bid response and then to the supply side. And then SSP publisher know exactly who participates in purchasing this impression. So at the end, Buyers.json and Dchain chain object are synced with an ID. As you can see highlighted in yellow, it's not magic, it's the ID of buyer.json, okay, you can see the 0 for the agency is also part in the daemon chain. In this way, SSP can make a kind of a connection between what the SSP is seeing in the bid request and what has declared by the DSP. The buyer.json and Dchain bring info behind each buyer. Yes, because in the bid response, you have only an ID, okay? So it's just an informatic information, it's a computer information. So with the seller, you have information if it's an intermediary, if it's a direct advertiser, etc. Better demand path optimization, yes. Before that, supply chain object, etc. is helping the industry for SPO, even if it's automatic, it helped. Okay, this helps the DSP to do that. SSP can do the same with that. And then it helps to identify the bad actors. Okay, yes, because if, for example, you identify many creative from buyers, you could identify it in all the ecosystem. This is really helpful for supply to block not only the creative, but also the buyer, no matter the DSP used. Now, let's talk about the IAB Tech Lab Transparency Center. Briefly, it's the Transparency Center provides a resource that makes it easy for digital advertising, okay, buyers, sellers, and ad tech company to see which standards media partner have implemented, their level of compliance, certification program results, and more. So in this Transparency Center, the member can browse a lot of data. For example, we have three parts: compliance, business identifiers, and supply chain. In compliance, you have OMSDK, maybe you're already familiar, also podcast measurement, data transparency, compliance, etc. For business identifiers, you have, for example, SCID network ID, identifiers by company, I will show you later. And then you have the supply chain part, which we have tailors.json, ads.txt, app.txt. So those data are really available through this Transparency Center. And then we have three components. So we have the supply chain validation. We now reside within the Transparency Center. So in fact, it's an metadata aggregator about supply chain. Okay, so you can check ads.txt, sellers.json as well, etc. For example, in this screenshot, I wanted to get some information about Disney.com. Okay, as you can see, you have the seller for about ads.txt. So as you can see, you have the advertising system, relationship, etc., etc. Okay, so a lot of information about that. Ads.txt, sellers.json, etc., etc. Second part, you have also a global industry compliance registry. Okay, it's a detail. Okay, data industry compliance and certification status of supply chain partners. So as you can see the screenshot, there are OMSDK, podcast, data transparency, IAB UK gold standard, etc. And then you have the company per compliance, as you can see the list, okay, to be more clear. And then the last one, there is advertising system aggregation, okay. It's to help buyers, sellers, etc., to get information about an ID about company. So as you can see, I wanted to check the identifiers. For example, we have the SCID network ID for Persona, Google, Centro, etc., and other ID. So it's really a big kind of database of identification. And the last thing is, of course, when you want to get this information, it can be manually. It's manually, but also automatic. So that's why IAB Tech Lab provides an API access. Okay. If you want to make it more automatic and to access those data with your system. And then let's talk about the last party, which is SCID, formerly Trust ID. So if you don't know what it is, SCID, in fact, is a key enabling identification and tracking through a campaign lifecycle. Okay, the goal is to keep following a campaign, provide more transparency, and bring the link in the program chain closer during the reporting operations. Okay, so basically, a training desk is used to working with many DSP, not only one, two, or most of the time many. Okay, and the idea is to have a unique and dedicated SCID to help to efficiently track the campaign regardless of the DSP. So let's see with an example. So this one is in a programmatic way without SCID. So advertisers send a brief media to the training desk, okay? And then the training desk is going to, in the brief media, you have the creative, the advertiser, etc. The training desk is going to, will push this campaign in the DSP. What happened? DSP1 is going to put X for the company ID of this, the company ID of this campaign will be XYZ for DSP1. For the same campaign, DSP2, for any reason, does not display any ID. And the DSP3, we have another ID campaign, which is 1, 2, 3. As you can see, one unique campaign and 3 different ways to identify it, which is a nightmare for training desk and publisher when they want to count impression and revenue. And if we talk about fraud for publisher, nightmare. By implementing SCID, what happened? Advertisers send the brief media to the training desk, okay, with the creative, the advertiser, etc., etc. Training desk will push this campaign, but along this campaign, it will create the SCID, okay? SCID is not something, it's not a random identification, there is a genuine specification, okay? And then along this campaign, the training desk will push this ID per DSP. At the end, publisher and training desk, no matter the SSP used or DSP, publisher and training desk can count impression and revenue and all the information they need. Okay, this is the idea of that, to keep tracking the campaign. Before that, it was Trust ID. What it was, rebrand, because a lot of text keyword situation using trust. Yes, because trust is a kind of today's trend. So we needed to change it. ID was redundant, definitely. ID, we can see everything everywhere, advertising and all around stuff. Also, it was mostly identified locally. Yes, in France, it was really known, but the goal of this project was worldwide. That's why we need a global adoption, and not enough explicit. Yes, Trust ID, it was not really good. That's why the rebranding Trust ID became the Dchain company identifier, based on the feedback and collaboration, which is great, and globally easy to understand. Okay, Dchain company identifier, it's phrasing. And then align with the programmatic standard. Yes, because in programmatic, you have a creative ID, you have a seat ID, you have campaign ID, of course, and then the share company identifier, it feels more programmatic standard. So now I let Pierre talk about the update and more.
Thank you, Alexander. Yeah, I will do the lobby part. As you may know, we are working on this project with Alexander and our smart and Xander counterpart for the last 2.5 years. We've been rolled it out to IAB Brazil, BVDV, IAB Austria, in all network next. And we are very happy today to announce that our first foreign proof of concept for shared campaign identifier has been executed and done really in a very efficient way by Xander, who partner with advertiser and media agency and one big media owners, Burda Forward in Germany. It has been a success. We had, as Hélène mentioned yesterday, we had a dedicated IAB Europe call on it. So if you want the details, we have a presentation we can share. And the goal now is, since we were out of France, we did in France, it's very well known. We did around 12 per proof of concept with several DSPs and SSPs and also freewheel on the video side. The goal is, now we roll it out in Germany, and the German market is, as you're very interested in transparency initiatives, we want to bring it also to UK through Association of Advertisers, but also to several national IABs. So we did a presentation for IAB with IAB Poland. We did one at the IAB, or we will do one with IAB board member in Portugal, and I will be speaker at the Danish Programmatic Conference in Denmark, in Copenhagen in November, to roll it out also in Denmark. And once we have 4 or 5 foreign POCs, we come back at the IAB Tech Lab, thanks to Alexander and the IAB Europe team, but also thanks to Xander guys. And we can convince other DSP to join the initiative. And thank you very much. If you have any question, please reach me or reach Alexander, who is CTO at IAB Europe, for technical question and for lobby question. You can contact Hélène or myself, and we will be happy to answer all the questions. Thank you so much.